So I said that I was going to try and review the rest of Resident Evil 4 before the end of 2016, and what better time to do it than Halloween? Since I already went over so much of the game in the first review, this one is probably going to be quite a bit shorter, and it will most definitely focus more on the design of specific modes that I'm looking at, rather than the game's design and mechanics as a whole. As such, I won't really be using the normal categories for this review, instead separating it into each game mode. Today, we'll be looking at Resident Evil 4's Separate Ways, Assignment Ada, and Mercenaries modes. Each of these modes offers something drastically different from the others, though each of them have one thing in common. They're way more action-oriented than the main game. So why wait, let's jump on in. Okay, so first up is Separate Ways, which is a companion story to the main game that stars Ada Wong from Resident Evil 2. I don't recall mentioning her too much in the original review, but Ada shows up every once in a while along Leon's journey. In Separate Ways, we get to learn what she was doing all the way out there, stalking him through rural Spain. Immediately when you start, you're thrust into the opening village battle, expected to defend yourself. Since you can only play Separate Ways after you beat the main game, it expects that you know what you're doing and doesn't pull any punches. I'm pretty sure the enemies are infinite this time, whereas they're not when you play as Leon. And the reason for that is because Ada is actually the one who rings the bell to distract the Ganados. One super great touch is that you can actually find an AI-controlled Leon fighting Ganados and running around frantically. I'm not sure if he can die or not, though I wouldn't be surprised if he could, even if it's only by your own hand. Now, this mode is definitely harder than the main story. Again, they assume you know what you're doing, so they also ratcheted up the difficulty of the enemies. They're more numerous per encounter, they take more damage, they sprint at you more often, and they even get up significantly faster when knocked down. In some ways, it's a welcome challenge. In others, it's kind of tiring, but I'll get to that later. The first thing I noted after I found the key, got out of the way, and things cooled down a bit, is that there's a nice attention to detail in this mode. The development team changed what Ada says when clicking on interactable objects, for example. They also added some new aspects to old enemy designs, including new hats and glasses. It's also really cool that they took the time to make as many nods to Leon's story as possible. The things Ada does really do cascade down to him, giving the mode some driving depth through the meta. As stated earlier, you find out that Ada is the one that rings the church bell to stop the village battle. To do this, she needs the church door insignia. It's found behind the church, where the green cat's eye is usually found when you're Leon. So what do? You travel down a bit further and you'll end up finding the cat's eye, which you then leave in the trap where you grab the insignia. This does create some inconsistencies and problems, mind you, which are rather thinly veiled. The only reason you need the cat's eye as Ada is because taking the insignia from the trap raises a door that prevents you from leaving the area. A door that doesn't show up when you're Leon. There's also the fact that you can shoot the church bell from outside. When you're Leon, this cleverly summons a few Ganados to the area, implying they don't know the difference between the bell being shot and being rung. They go when they hear the bell, it's that simple. Well, unless you're Ada, because for some reason shooting the bell just summons a message saying that Ada needs to find a way to actually ring the bell. I totally get why they did things like this, but it feels a bit poorly thought out. Why could they not have had the bell boarded up when Ada gets there or something, so that it couldn't be shot? Then, when you turn the mechanism on inside the church, the swinging of the bell breaks the boards off. Or why could they not have added the door to the trap holding the cat's eye to Leon's campaign as well in the PS2 version, and then either ask the player to find some useless item to replace it with, or even just ask them to put any item they don't want from their inventory in there. I wouldn't necessarily say this is objectively a negative aspect to the game, but it feels just a bit sloppy, and did make me less excited to experiment and explore in Separate Ways. This mode has other problems that hurt it anyway, that are a much bigger deal. Separate Ways really does go to show you how delicate the balance is for Resident Evil 4, and how they got it right for Leon. The normal story mode has a great mix of large battles, mid-scale skirmishes, intimate fights, and quiet moments. By contrast, this mode is much more action-heavy and therefore kinda boring. It took me about 7 hours to complete, and I only mildly enjoyed it overall. The controls in RE4 are specifically designed for slower-paced, awkward combat, with the occasional burst of heavy action pushing them outside their comfort zone. Even super crazy scenes in Leon's campaign had small pockets where you could take a breather and regroup. Separate Ways struggles with this a lot more. The important flow between combat and non-combat is broken here. It gets fatiguing to play, and it feels one-dimensional and repetitive. Separate Ways mostly explores the same areas as the main story, though it does have some new areas. Most of them are all packed within Chapter 4, including a massive battleship that you're expected to sink all on your own. The mode also adds a new weapon in the form of a crossbow with exploding bolts. Rather powerful, this weapon takes up a lot of space. I would say not to buy it until near the end though. Once the mode starts winding down, you'll have 2 boss fights practically in a row. A fight with Krauser and then a fight with Sadler. These fights can be rather difficult by themselves, especially the Krauser fight, but there's one thing you can do to make them essentially cake, especially the Krauser fight. Save as much of the crossbow ammo as you can during the rest of the story. Once you get the ability to upgrade to the biggest attaché case, then make room for the crossbow and buy it. Not long after, you'll find Krauser. The arena you fight him in is a series of 3 small platforms. Most of his attacks are really quick and can reach across the platforms you're on to hit you really easily. Just like with the final Krauser fight as Leon, Krauser's arm can block most incoming attacks. The goal should be to prevent him from attacking you while you attack him. But how do you do this? Well, it's pretty simple. Instead of using other weapons, use the crossbow. And instead of shooting at Krauser, shoot at the ground near his feet. The AoE of the explosion will hurt him, cause him to stumble, and he'll backflip away. Once he's back to neutral, repeat the process. Do this on each platform until he's dead, and you'll have killed Krauser without even taking a hit. Sadler can be beaten in much the same way, though he doesn't stagger like Krauser, and he takes several more bolts to kill. Regardless, even though I sold like half of my bolts over the course of the story because I felt they were taking up too much space, I still had basically enough for both fights. After this is a timed run to get to the red rocket launcher for Leon, so that he can put Sadler out of his misery. Do this and you've made it to the end. While her motives are still unclear, Ada is now free to fly away to Wesker with the Plagas sample. This is only the second time I've beaten Assignment Ada. I'm not sure why, but I always thought this mode was timed, and that after you completed your objective, you had to make your way out the same way you came in. Well, none of that is true at all. Instead, it's a simple, action-oriented, linear trek through much of the island part of the game. It took me about an hour and a half to complete. I believe this was originally supposed to be Separate Ways before Separate Ways existed. This mode was in the GameCube original, and Separate Ways was not. Both seem to be an attempt to explain what Ada was doing there, but Assignment Ada is significantly more detached. As such, this is more of just a crazy extra mode like Tofu mode in Resident Evil 2, or Wesker mode in the HD version of Resident Evil 0. Anyway, Assignment Ada tasks you with exploring the island and gathering up 5 different Plagas samples before making it to Exfil. This mode was challenging, mostly because of the JJ enemies and the small inventory. An inventory that gets even smaller as you pick up the Plagas samples. Instead of being stored in the key items section, the game asks you to store them in your attaché case, an interesting and welcome bit of added challenge. Luckily, you get boatloads of ammo and items here, so your worry will be more about what to throw out than what weapons are out of ammo. And you'll want to stock up as much as possible, because the end gets tough. This mode is fun, because it's designed a bit more like a shooter. You get so much ammo that you don't need to worry about conservation. This changes the way you traverse environments and deal with encounters, making the awkward controls less of an issue. Where in Separate Ways, or the main story, you'd be skirting around enemies trying to get headshots so that you can kick and knife a bastard to death, Assignment Ada gives you so much ammo that you can often just hunker down and turret things to death instead. As such, you don't have to deal with the shortcomings of the tank controls as much, instead focusing on the positive aspects, simply because you don't really need to dance around enemies near as often. They shored up this design by taking away Ada's knife altogether, as well as her shotgun. These changes emphasize the bullet spray mentality really well. These really are just great complementary changes, which for me made this the most fun mode out of the three we're talking about. Still, you don't want to go too crazy, because the final fight here is also a fight with Krauser, and he takes a lot of hits to kill. This fight instead takes place on a narrow bridge of sorts. It's interesting how this game framed the same single fight 3 different ways, and they all do indeed feel like separate encounters in a lot of ways that are worthy of existing. If you're not good at the QuickTime events here though, you're screwed. His attacks are largely unavoidable since the bridge is so narrow, meaning you have to hit those dodge commands quickly. Since you don't have any exploding crossbow bolts here, you'll have to rely on a dance of dodging and shooting at Krauser's feet to come out the victor. The whole time you'll essentially be running laps around the bridge, dodging his swings to survive. But it's not too difficult if you're good at those QuickTime events. This is probably the most intimate boss encounter in all of RE4, since you can't hide behind magnums or rocket launchers. And in a lot of ways, that makes it the best one in my opinion. If you run out of ammo though, you might as well just restart. Okay, so now to the most widely loved extra mode in the game, the mode that I could never get into. Mercenaries. I totally get what they were going for, and for the hour and a half I took to unlock everything, the first time I'd ever unlocked everything by the way, I had fun. But this mode really does emphasize how poorly RE4's controls translate to pure action. Mercenaries is extraordinarily fun in later RE titles because of the control updates, but here, I feel the tension comes from the wrong places. Mercenaries has a total of 4 levels to play, some based on story sections and others brand new. It also gives you 5 characters to play as, with Leon as the only one you start with. To unlock the others, you need to get at least 4 stars on each of the stages with any character. Again, this is the first time I was ever able to do this. I was surprised at how quickly I did it actually. Previously, I'd only ever been able to unlock Ada. Anyway, Mercenaries is a timed battle with enormous amounts of enemies in closed areas. Each stage has different enemy types, as well as a different mini-boss enemy. The first stage is the village, which uses normal villagers and the Bea sisters as the boss. The second stage is the castle, using castellans, and has the Wolverine enemy as the boss. The third is kind of like the action stage where you're being helped by the helicopter on the island. The boss of this stage is the Gatling gun wielding JJ. The final stage is a brand new dock area, and stars a brand new boss enemy. This enemy is basically a chainsaw guy, who's 7 feet tall, wields a double-bladed chainsaw, doesn't stagger, and does nothing but sprint towards you swinging wildly and screaming. If he gets near you, you're dead. Luckily, each character has their own strengths which can help you face the coming threats. Leon is pretty normal and pretty weak, but he's the only one with access to a shotgun, good for crowd control. Ada finds a lot of incendiary grenades, and can absolutely destroy with her TMP. Again though, she has no knife here. Krauser uses a normal bow that's unique to him. It's really powerful. His alternative is flash grenades. However, he's unique in that he can call upon the power of Las Plagas to do a slicing dash with his arm. It's so powerful that it literally will kill anything in one hit, but after you use it, it has to recharge. Next is Hunk from RE2, who has a TMP, frag grenades, and an instant kill neckbreaker attack that replaces the kick most of the characters perform on staggered enemies. If you can get a hold of a flash grenade with him, this allows you to chain neckbreakers. He can also break the necks of enemies like the Bea sisters, killing them instantly as well. Finally, there's Wesker. He has a silenced pistol, which is 5 times more likely to land critical hits when you get a headshot. This pistol also reloads extraordinarily swiftly. He also has access to the Killer 7 Magnum and the semi-automatic sniper rifle. Wesker's kick is replaced with a Fist of Doom attack that does enormous amounts of damage to any and all enemies in front of him. It's not as powerful as the Neckbreaker or Krauser's arm, but it doesn't have to recharge and it can deal with multiple enemies at a time. Mercenaries basically has two basic mechanics, the timer and the scoring system. You start each stage with a limited amount of time. When it runs out, the game is over. As you explore the level, you can find time to add to said timer, so that you can spend more time killing enemies. Each kill gives you points, and quick subsequent kills also add to a combo counter. When the combo breaks, you get bonus points for how many kills you comboed together. You can also run across bonus time objects in each stage, which will give you 30 seconds where each kill will automatically give you an extra 1,000 points. This is a lot of points, so take care to use these wisely. Boss enemies will start showing up over time, sometimes after you've explored around a certain area. They can continue to show up and overwhelm you if you're not careful, so you need to kill them as quickly as possible. Luckily, they offer you a good chunk of points and are therefore worth taking down. Despite being rather fun at points, this mode is just really hard, and perfecting it to unlock the hand cannon for use in the main story is absolutely insane. It asks that you get 5 stars with all 5 characters on every level. The hand cannon is a monstrous magnum that's fun to use, but it's not really worth the trouble. I didn't get a single 5-star run here, and I have no clue how you're supposed to do so with some of these characters. How in the world can Leon fight the super chainsaw guys? Obviously, there are people good enough to do so. I am not, so this is where my Mercenaries career ends, at least for Resident Evil 4. If there's one overlying issue with all of these modes, it's that the focus on action doesn't fit Resident Evil 4's controls terribly well. It really goes to show you how well balanced the main game is, because these modes can feel overwhelming, clunky, unfair, and repetitive simply because of how much more intense and dense the action in them is. Modes like Separate Ways no longer have a good balance of downtime and slow-paced exploration thrown in. Every area is riddled with enemies, and there are almost always a metric ton of them bearing down on you. Meanwhile, Assignment Ada and Mercenaries are supposed to be nothing but action by design. It's not terrible or anything, particularly for extra content. It's actually pretty great, but I won't pretend that I didn't get a little bored and frustrated at times, particularly with Separate Ways. I also won't pretend that the mechanics work well with this sort of action, because they just don't really support it. Assignment Ada is the most successful of the 3 in terms of balance. It shows how a high-action RE4 can kind of work well, by making it a short linear trek, and by giving the player a strong arsenal of weapons to start with. If you're a fan of RE4, there's absolutely no reason not to mess around with any of these modes really. Otherwise, don't lose sleep over skipping them. All that being said, I only have one question for you guys this week. Have any of you actually unlocked the dang hand cannon? How difficult was it for you? See you next video. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you're interested in another one, here's the last one that I uploaded. You can also follow me on Twitter or subscribe by hitting the subscribe button.